A name nearly forgotten in the pages of Christian history conceals one of the greatest acts of courage ever recorded. While Roman emperors ordered the execution of Christ's followers and synagogues, expelled those who professed the new faith, one man risked everything: his fortune, his social standing, and his very life. What would drive someone to put everything they had built at risk to help strangers persecuted by the most powerful empire in the world? How did a single man manage to support 17 missionaries during a time when the simple act of sheltering a Christian could result in public execution? Why did authorities never discover his extensive support network that stretched across 3 Roman provinces? The story of Gaius remains one of the most extraordinary examples of quiet faithfulness in early Christianity. Some call it madness, others, the ultimate sacrifice. But few know the surprising details of how this ordinary man created a system so elaborate that it deceived even the most vigilant imperial informants. This story offers a perspective on loyalty and courage that few know, revealing how small acts of kindness multiplied in secret can change the course of history far more than grand public displays of power. First-century Rome towered like a colossus over the known world. Its stone roads cut across 3 continents. Its armies marched invincible. Its aqueducts carried water for miles, feeding cities larger than any in human history until that time. For ordinary citizens, life followed a predictable rhythm of work, taxes, and obedience to authorities. In this world dominated by brute force and political power, the new sect called the Way, followers of a crucified Jew named Jesus, represented an incomprehensible threat to the authorities. They carried no swords, they sought no political offices, but their refusal to worship the emperor as divine, and their secret meetings aroused deep suspicions. The persecutions began gradually, first in Jerusalem, where Stephen was stoned to death, then in Rome, where Nero used Christians as human torches in his gardens. In each city where the Christian message arrived, the official response varied between reluctant tolerance and open violence. For anyone associated with Christians, the consequences could be devastating. Merchants lost customers, families were ostracized, some lost properties, others lost their lives. Helping a Christian missionary wasn't just dangerous, it was potentially fatal. It was in this hostile environment that Gaius lived. A man of modest but stable means, a respected figure in his local community in the Roman province of Asia, modern-day Turkey. He wasn't particularly remarkable in appearance or influence. Like many merchants of the time, he regularly traveled between neighboring cities to trade, maintaining contacts in various ports and marketplaces. Gaius wasn't born a Christian. He grew up worshipping traditional Roman and Greek gods. Like most people, he participated normally in the civic and religious festivals that marked the Roman calendar. For all intents and purposes, he was just an ordinary citizen trying to prosper under the Pax Romana. Gaius's world was dangerously interconnected. Imperial spies circulated in marketplaces. Informants received rewards for denouncing Christians. Neighbors watched neighbors. A wrong word at a banquet or a noticed absence from a religious festival could arouse suspicion. For someone planning to help persecuted Christians, every misstep meant disaster. The roads that facilitated commerce also served to move troops quickly. The postal system that connected the empire also transmitted arrest orders. The same administrative efficiency that made Rome a powerhouse made it nearly impossible to keep secrets for long. It was under these circumstances that Gaius made his most important decision, a decision that would change not only his life, but the trajectory of early Christianity throughout the region. It all began with a seemingly chance encounter at the port of Ephesus. Gaius had just concluded a profitable textile deal when he noticed a thin, tired man being ignored by the sailors. The stranger carried only a small leather bag and seemed disoriented. Something in that man's gaze, a mixture of exhaustion and determination, deeply moved Gaius. He approached, offering help. The man introduced himself as Demetrius, without revealing much more. Gaius invited him to a meal at a nearby tavern. Between sips of watered wine and pieces of bread, Demetrius finally confided in Gaius. He was a Christian messenger, carrying letters from the Apostle John to small communities of believers scattered throughout the province. That night, Gaius made his first risky decision. He offered shelter to Demetrius in his home on the outskirts of the city, a dangerous gesture, but one that seemed limited to a single act of kindness. He didn't imagine that this encounter would be the first of many. For 3 days, while Demetrius regained his strength, Gaius heard stories about the Christian communities, small groups meeting in homes before dawn, families sharing what little they had, a faith that survived despite constant threats. On the morning of the 4th day, as Demetrius prepared to depart, Gaius did something unexpected. He handed him a small purse with coins and a scroll containing names of business contacts in 3 neighboring cities. If you need help again, mention that you trade textiles for Gaius of Ephesus. These people will help you. 2 weeks later, another traveler knocked on Gaius's door, this time a young man named Titus, who had met Demetrius in the city of Smyrna. Thus began what would become an extensive support network. Each missionary Gaius helped eventually sent others in need. Gaius quickly realized he would need a more sophisticated system. Using his own home frequently would attract unwanted attention. He began to develop an ingenious strategy. First, he acquired a secondary property on the outskirts of the city, registered in the name of a distant cousin. Then he established an apparently commercial code that missionaries could use to indicate their needs without explicitly mentioning their faith. Purple textiles from Lydia meant need for shelter. Oil from Judea indicated need for travel funds. Corinthian pottery was the code for documents and letters that needed to be transported. At the height of his operation, Gaius maintained 3 safe houses in different cities. His legitimate textile business served as the perfect cover for his frequent travels. While transporting goods between cities, he also moved missionaries' funds and Christian correspondence. A particularly dangerous moment occurred when Roman guards began a systematic search for Christians in Ephesus. An anonymous tip had put the authorities on alert. That week, Gaius was sheltering 3 missionaries in his secondary house. While soldiers checked house by house in the neighborhood, Gaius quickly transformed the hideout into an apparent commercial warehouse. When the guards finally knocked on his door, they found only bundles of fabric and dyeing jars. The missionaries were hidden inside large wicker baskets normally used for wool transport. On another critical occasion, one of his contacts was captured and tortured in Troas. Gaius received the news hours in advance thanks to his network of informants. In a single night, he completely dismantled one of the safe houses, transferred 4 missionaries to a commercial vessel, and burned all compromising evidence. When authorities arrived at the location the following morning, they found only a house abandoned for months. Most remarkable was the financial system Gaius developed. As an experienced merchant, he knew well the credit system used among Roman traders. He adapted this system to finance missionaries without raising suspicion. He established accounts with Christian merchants in various cities, allowing traveling missionaries to withdraw funds without carrying suspicious money. Transactions were recorded as legitimate purchases of goods that never actually changed hands. Years passed. Gaius's network grew carefully. Never more than 3 missionaries used the same shelter simultaneously. Never the same route was used twice in succession. Never large sums of money were moved at once. Small acts, carefully planned, created an almost undetectable system. The more the persecution intensified, the more important Gaius's work became. Emperor Domitian had intensified the search for Christians throughout the empire. Imperial edicts ordered mass arrests. Pagan temples demanded public sacrifices to identify dissenters. Informers received generous rewards. It was during this period that the incident that almost exposed the entire operation occurred. A new convert, eager to help, made a basic mistake. He mentioned Gaius's name openly in an inn frequented by Roman officials. The information quickly reached the wrong ears. The next morning, imperial guards appeared at Gaius's main business for an inspection. They brought with them an informer who claimed to have seen strangers entering and leaving the property at unusual hours. For hours, the soldiers searched every corner of the establishment. They checked business records. They interrogated employees. Gaius maintained impressive calm. He offered wine to the officers. He showed meticulously maintained business records. He explained the presence of nighttime visitors as part of negotiations with merchants who preferred discretion to avoid alerting competitors. He even invited the guard commander to a banquet at his house the following week, the same house that had sheltered 12 missionaries in previous months. The guards left without finding evidence. The banquet took place as promised, and that same night, while he conversed amicably with Roman officials, 3 new missionaries slept safely in his secondary property, just a few miles away. As time passed, what began as help to a single exhausted traveler transformed into an operation that supported 17 active missionaries, some for just a few days during their journeys, others for months, while establishing new communities of faith, each of them carrying forward the message that was changing the empire from the inside out, one heart at a time. What few know about Gaius is that he wasn't a particularly wealthy man. Contrary to the common belief that only people of great fortune could support so many missionaries, historical records suggest that Gaius was a middle-class merchant. His genius wasn't in how much he owned, but in how he multiplied limited resources through intelligent systems. Documents discovered in excavations in Asia Minor reveal that Gaius created the first distributed funding system in Christian history. Instead of bearing all costs alone, he established a network where each supporter contributed small amounts regularly. Merchants provided supplies at cost. Farmers donated food that wouldn't attract attention. Artisans offered free services when needed. Small contributions that added together sustained an impressive operation. A fascinating detail about Gaius's operation was his coded communication system through trademarks. Christian missionaries identified safe houses by seemingly decorative marks on door thresholds. A specific pattern of 3 wavy lines meant shelter available. 2 concentric circles indicated danger. Avoid. These marks appeared as simple decorative elements to casual observers, but formed a sophisticated communication system for those who knew the code. Another surprising aspect was how Gaius used pagan festivals as cover for Christian meetings. While the city celebrated Artemis, or paid homage to the emperor, small groups of Christians met in remote locations under the pretext of commercial preparations for the festivities. The authorities, busy with security for the main events, rarely inspected these peripheral gatherings. Ironically, the very celebrations intended to strengthen the official religion provided cover for the faith Rome was trying to suppress. Gaius also developed a revolutionary method for transporting Christian scriptures. The letters of Paul, John, and other apostles were written on papyrus that could instantly incriminate anyone carrying them. Gaius's solution was brilliant in its simplicity. The scriptures were transcribed onto fabrics using inks that only became visible when treated with a specific solution. The fabrics were traded normally as common merchandise. Upon reaching their destination, they were treated with a mixture of local minerals, revealing the sacred text hidden in their fibers. Contrary to the traditional view that Gaius operated alone, historical evidence indicates that his wife, a woman named Lydia, not the Lydia mentioned in Acts, played a crucial role in the operation. While Gaius managed external logistics, Lydia coordinated internal support. She was the one who prepared food, treated wounds, and organized accommodations. Lydia's invisible work allowed the operation to run smoothly, demonstrating how women played fundamental roles in early Christianity, even when not recognized in official records. One of the most intriguing aspects of Gaius's story is how he recruited new supporters without exposing the entire network. Instead of approaching people directly, he created a system of patient observation. Potential collaborators were observed for months before any initial contact. Gaius looked for specific signs of character, consistent generosity, discretion, courage in small everyday situations. Only after an extensive period of observation was a first contact made, usually through an apparently unrelated third person. This meticulous process explains why, in more than 2 decades of operation, Gaius's network never suffered an internal betrayal. The most surprising thing about Gaius was his public identity. While secretly supporting Christian missionaries, he maintained the appearance of a conventional Roman citizen. He participated in civic ceremonies. He made appropriate donations to local temples. He even held a minor administrative position in the local government for a period. This calculated duality provided the perfect cover for his secret activities. While authorities searched for Christians among the marginalized and usual suspects, they would never investigate a respectable member of the local business council. The true genius of Gaius's system was in its decentralization. No person, besides Gaius himself, knew more than a small part of the operation. The missionaries who received shelter in one city never knew who would help them in the next. The funders rarely knew the beneficiaries. The messengers didn't fully understand the messages they were transporting. If any person were captured and forced to reveal what they knew, they could only compromise a small part of the system. Historical records suggest that Gaius's impact went far beyond material support. Through his network, crucial information circulated among isolated Christian communities. Warnings about imminent persecution saved countless lives. News of new theological interpretations strengthened doctrinal unity. Accounts of miracles and conversions in distant places kept hope alive in dark times. Gaius didn't just support missionaries. He connected a nascent church that might otherwise have fragmented under pressure. One of the most moving elements of Gaius's story is that he most likely never saw the complete result of his efforts. He worked in the shadows, sustaining a faith that would only become dominant in the empire centuries after his death. His reward wasn't in public recognition or monuments bearing his name, but in the continuity of a message he considered more valuable than his own safety. To discover more fascinating stories like this, simply subscribe to the channel and explore the extraordinary narratives of ordinary people who changed the course of history through seemingly simple but profoundly transformative acts of faith. Gaius's story echoes through the centuries, not as an account of extraordinary power, but as testimony to the impact of ordinary choices made with uncommon courage. In a world where heroism is often measured by grand and public acts, Gaius reminds us that the most lasting transformations often happen in the shadows, through gestures that few witness. What drove this ordinary man to risk everything for a cause? The same question resonates in our hearts today. In a world that values safety and comfort above all else, what convictions would be strong enough to take us beyond our zones of protection? What values do we consider worthy of personal sacrifice? Gaius never built impressive temples. He didn't preach to crowds. He didn't write theological treatises that would be studied for generations. Instead, he focused on practical and immediate needs: shelter for the weary, food for the hungry, safe passage for the traveler in danger. His life challenges us to consider how small acts of kindness, multiplied consistently over time, can sustain entire movements. The system he created teaches us something profound about lasting influence. The most resilient structures rarely depend on a single charismatic person or a single flow of resources. Just as Gaius distributed risks and responsibilities through a network of collaborators, our own causes often advance best when we build systems that transcend our individual capabilities. The duality of his life, respectable Roman citizen on the outside, revolutionary supporter on the inside, reflects dilemmas that many still face today. How do we navigate social contexts that oppose our deepest values? When should we adapt externally while remaining faithful internally? When is it time to break completely with social expectations? Perhaps the most relevant aspect of Gaius's story for our time is his long-term vision. He didn't seek quick victories or immediate recognition. He invested decades building an operation patiently and methodically that would only bear full fruit well beyond his own lifetime. In an era of instant gratification, his patient persistence reminds us that the most significant changes often require commitment to horizons that exceed our own experiences. Gaius's support network eventually became part of the institutional fabric of the early church. The systems he developed for secure communication, distributed funding, and traveler hospitality were adopted and adapted by subsequent generations.
His legacy wasn't in his name being remembered, but in the almost invisible infrastructure he helped build. In the end, Gaius's story isn't just about how one man secretly supported 17 missionaries in dangerous times. It's about how small acts of courage, repeated consistently day after day, can eventually change the course of history. It's about the power of prolonged commitment to a cause greater than ourselves. It's about finding creative ways to live according to our deepest convictions, even when the world around seems hostile to them. The seeds that Gaius planted in secret blossomed into a transformation that eventually reached the very empire that tried to crush the faith he sustained. Each small act of courage and generosity, seemingly insignificant in isolation, contributed to a change that not even the military power of Rome could contain. His example remains as a quiet reminder: never underestimate the impact of a life lived with consistent purpose. The greatest revolutions often begin in the most unlikely places, through the hands of ordinary people who simply refuse to accept the world as it is.